Introducing Audiobook Top, your new home for the finest selection of audiobooks available anywhere.
Friends, fellow travelers on the winding road of human experience, let us pause and peer into a curious chamber of the human heart, that very crucible where integrity may be forged or, alas, utterly dissolved. Our subject today is no less than Ferdinand Fathom, but our focus lies not on his grand deceptions, but on the delicate, almost imperceptible threads that first began to weave the fabric of a scoundrel. For a rogue, you see, is not simply born, but meticulously, subtly, even tragically, asterisk made asterisk. Imagine a young mind, sharp as a newly whetted blade, yet devoid of the steadying hand of principle. Ferdinand, from his earliest breath, was a child of circumstances rather than virtue. His mother, a woman whose wits were perpetually sharpened on the grindstone of self-preservation, became his unwitting first tutor. He observed her deft maneuvers, her artful pleas, her convenient tears, and the surprising efficacy of a well-timed lie. Each instance was a lesson, not in morality, but in strategy. The world, to him, presented itself as a vast chessboard, and humanity, merely a collection of pieces to be moved for one's advantage. This wasn't a sudden plunge into villainy, but a gradual chilling accretion. Picture a craftsman slowly, patiently honing his tools. Ferdinand, too, honed his faculties. He learned to distinguish genuine emotion from exploitable sentiment. He discovered the subtle leverage points in another's vanity, the gaping maw of their greed, or the trembling fear that could be twisted to his purpose. He mastered the chameleon's art, adopting the hue of piety, humility, or fervent admiration, all while his inner ledger coldly tallied potential gains. The anatomy of his scoundrel nature lay in this: an extraordinary capacity for observation married to an absolute absence of conscience. He saw people not as fellow souls, but as mechanisms whose levers and pulleys he could manipulate. Every kind word was a probe, every shared confidence a vulnerability mapped. He built his repertoire of deception brick by insidious brick, constructing a formidable fortress of artifice around a hollow core. He understood that appearances were everything, and truth merely an inconvenient detail. This slow, deliberate sculpting of his character, from a cunning child to a master of imposture, provides us with a profound, if unsettling, blueprint for the making of a true charlatan. His very soul became a testament to the fact that the most dangerous villains are often those whose depravity is not a sudden eruption, but a carefully cultivated, subtly perfected art. Greetings, dear reader, and welcome. Pull up a chair, draw closer to the hearth, for the tale we embark upon tonight is not merely one of escapades and misadventures, though those shall certainly abound. No, we stand at the threshold of a story that dares to delve deeper, to cast a searching light into the shadowy corners of human nature itself, promising a journey unlike any you may have anticipated. You, no doubt, are acquainted with the traditional rogue of our era, the charming rascal, perhaps driven by hunger or youthful folly, whose audacious schemes often land him in a comical scrape, only to escape by the skin of his teeth, leaving a wry chuckle in his wake. A scoundrel, yes, but often with a redeemable glint in his eye, a certain warmth beneath the thievery, making him, in a strange way, relatable. But prepare yourselves, for Ferdinand Count Fathom is cut from a different cloth entirely. The introduction to his complete adventures serves not as a mere preliminary, but as a solemn declaration we are stepping beyond the 18th century rogue. Here lies no lovable scamp, no charming trickster whose heart, though misguided, might yet hold a spark of goodness. Fathom is a meticulous architect of misfortune, a maestro of manipulation, whose villainy is both subtle and profound. His motivations spring not from immediate necessity, but from a cold, calculating ambition, a profound understanding of human frailty, and a chilling delight in exploiting it. Smollett, with the sharpest of quills, invites us to examine a villain whose craft is insidious, whose smile hides an abyss, and whose every move is a carefully plotted chess play against the unsuspecting world. This is not the brute force of a highwayman, but the insidious poison of a whisper, the velvet cloak of deceit. He doesn't merely survive, he thrives on the ruin of others, not for a moment's pleasure, but for lasting gain and a perverse sense of power that elevates him beyond mere criminality. This introduction is our warning, our compass into the labyrinth of his mind. It tells us that Fathom will challenge our preconceptions of evil, forcing us to confront a darkness that is more intellectual, more psychological, and ultimately, more chilling than the simple criminality we've come to expect. His story is a looking glass, reflecting the vulnerabilities of society and the dangers of unexamined trust. It's a journey not just through the external world of 18th century Europe, but into the very heart of human malevolence, presented not for amusement, but for a profound moral lesson. Come, let us begin, but tread carefully, for the path of Count Fathom is fraught with peril, both for those he encounters, and for our own understanding of good and ill. Chapter 1. A Birth Shrouded in Deceit. Gather round, my friends, and let us commence our journey into the shadowed heart of a man whose very existence was forged in the crucible of cunning and deceit. Our tale begins not with noble lineage or the clang of chivalry, but amidst the gritty realities of war, specifically the French camp near Tournai, where a siege, as all sieges are, was a theater for both heroism and human frailty. Here, in this tumultuous backdrop, we find a young woman, possessing a certain comeliness and, more importantly, an astute perception of human weakness. She was, in plain terms, a camp follower, one of those resourceful souls who navigated the chaos of military life, trading favors and fetching comforts, always with a calculating eye to self-preservation and, dare I say, advancement. It was here, during a fleeting liaison with a certain French chevalier, a man of some distinction, but whose name now matters little save for the ripple he created in the great stream of fate, that a seed was planted. A seed that would, in time, blossom into our protagonist, Ferdinand Fathom. But our mother, you see, was no sentimental fool, nor one to be burdened by inconvenient truths. Her pregnancy was not an occasion for tender sighs, but a significant problem to be solved, a secret to be guarded with unwavering resolve. Fortune, however, often favors the bold, and sometimes the artfully deceptive. She soon caught the discerning eye of a lady of considerable distinction, the wife of a French general, a woman of noble sentiment, perhaps a little too eager to see virtue where it merely feigned. This lady, captivated by our protagonist's mother's beauty and her carefully cultivated air of genteel misfortune, rather than perceiving her calculated opportunism, took her under her protective wing. A virtuous orphan, she was deemed worthy of succor and employment. Oh, the delicious, bitter irony! Thus, the pregnant woman, now cloaked in the impeccable guise of respectability, was transported from the muddy camp to the elegant boudoirs of Paris. There, in the very heart of sophisticated society, she managed, with breathtaking discretion and a calm heart, to conceal her swelling condition. And one quiet night, without a whisper betraying the momentous event, she brought forth her son, Ferdinand, into the world, within the luxurious, unsuspecting confines of her benefactress's grand residence. Imagine the scene: a child of the camp, conceived in casual transgression, born in secret, under the very roof of unsuspecting nobility. His first cries, muffled by silken drapes and the hushed movements of his cunning mother, were a potent prelude to a life that would master the art of dissimulation. When the general, the lady's husband, returned from his campaign, the mother's cleverness was truly put to the test. How to explain this unexpected infant, now a tangible testament to her deception? With a ready wit and an even readier, utterly plausible fabrication, perhaps concerning a distant relative's unfortunate circumstances, or a child she had nobly pledged to rear, she not only placated her kind-hearted patroness, but solidified her own position, enhancing her image as a paragon of compassion. And so, my friends, the very foundations of Ferdinand Count Fathom's existence were laid upon a bedrock of artifice. Born in the shadows of a lie, raised under the banner of a false narrative, his very first breath was drawn in an atmosphere thick with calculated deception. From such beginnings, what other course could his life possibly take, but one paved with ingenuity, self-interest, and, indeed, all manner of artful villainy? The die, it seems, was cast long before the boy could even utter a word. Chapter 2. The Education of a Predator. Ferdinand Fathom. A name that would later slither through the salons and back alleys of Europe like a serpent through tall grass. But before he became Count Fathom, before the silks and the smiles that hid daggers, he was merely Ferdinand. And his education, my friends, was not of textbooks and learned men, but of shadows and whispers. He was a child of circumstance, born not in the cradle of luxury, but amidst the rough and tumble of camp life, his mother a camp follower of questionable repute, his father a fleeting notion. From the very dust and din, young Ferdinand learned his first vital lesson: survival is a performance. He watched, with eyes far too old for his tender years, how fortunes were won and lost on a toss of the dice, how favors were bought with a wink and a promise, how honesty was often the first casualty of ambition. His playground was the world's stage, teeming with its grand hypocrisies. He saw men preen with false virtue, Women weep crocodile tears, and everyone, striving to outwit the next. And Ferdinand. He was a sponge, soaking it all in. He didn't just see the world's deceit, he began to understand its mechanics. He learned the subtle art of mirroring, of reflecting back to a man the image he wished to see of himself. He mastered the precise curve of a flattering smile, the earnest furrow of a brow when expressing false sympathy, the measured pause before delivering a perfectly constructed lie. There was no moral compass to guide him, no stern hand to redirect his gaze from the glittering prizes of duplicity. Conscience for Ferdinand was an inconvenience, a weakness indulged by lesser men. He perceived it as a vulnerability, a chink in the armor of those who sought to navigate the treacherous currents of society. Instead, he cultivated a chilling pragmatism. He saw people not as souls, but as instruments, levers to be pulled, strings to be plucked, to achieve his own ends. This wasn't an education bestowed, but one forged within him, brick by painstaking brick, by the very world he inhabited. Each petty theft undetected, each lie believed, each moment of human gullibility witnessed, added another layer to the intricate architecture of his future self. He learned that fear could be a whip, desire a lure, and vanity a silken noose. His schooling was in the dissection of human nature, discovering its soft spots, its blind spots, its aching voids. And as he grew, so too did his mastery of this grim curriculum, transforming the neglected child into the emerging architect of his own dark destiny. He was becoming, quite simply, a predator. And the world, unsuspecting, was his unsuspecting prey. Chapter 3. First Conquests. First Lies Friends. Gather close, for tonight we peer into the formative years of a most singular spirit, Ferdinand Fathom. Our last tale left him poised on the cusp of discovery, but what he discovered, and what he made others discover, was seldom the truth. From his tenderest years, a peculiar light shone in Ferdinand's eyes, not the innocent sparkle of childhood, but a knowing glint, observant and calculating. While other boys chased butterflies and dreamed of sweets, young Fathom was charting the currents of human weakness. His tutors, good men, saw diligence. His benefactors, kind women, saw gratitude. Yet, beneath this veneer, a formidable intellect was honing its deadliest weapon, dissimulation. His first conquests were not of land or love, but of simple trust. A maid, easily swayed by his feigned affection, would sneak him an extra confection. A stable boy, charmed by his carefully crafted tale of woe, would grant him access to forbidden corners. Each small triumph, each successful lie was a brick laid in the foundation of his future empire of deceit. He understood instinctively that truth was a clumsy instrument, falsehood, however, was a surgeon's scalpel, precise and potent. I recall a day, when barely past his 10th year, he desired a certain book, a treatise on ancient strategies, deemed far too advanced for him. He did not plead, nor did he steal. Instead, he cultivated an air of profound melancholy. He would sit by the window, gazing forlornly, sighing just audibly enough to catch the attention of his guardian. When gently questioned, he spun a lament of unfulfilled intellectual curiosity, of a spirit yearning for knowledge beyond his grasp, framed with such touching humility that resistance crumbled. The book was not just granted, it was offered with praise for his burgeoning intellect. Ah, the subtle art! He had learned that sorrow, when skillfully portrayed, could be more potent than any direct request. He had conquered a desire, not through force, but through the delicate art of emotional manipulation. These were his first skirmishes, fought with smiles and tears, and in every one, truth was the first casualty. He was not merely telling lies, he was crafting alternative realities, and the world, it seemed, was quite ready to believe him. The stage was set, and young Ferdinand, the master of disguise, was about to step onto a far grander one. Chapter 4. The Grand Tour, a school for scoundrels. Ah, the Grand Tour! A pilgrimage, some called it, for the burgeoning gentlemen of England, a finishing school of manners and knowledge. But for young Ferdinand Fathom, it was no less than a masterclass in the human condition, a curriculum designed by vice itself, under the tutelage of opportunities as myriad as the cobbled streets of Europe. He stepped onto foreign shores, not with the wide-eyed wonder of his peers, but with the shrewd, calculating gaze of a merchant surveying a bustling market. His fellow travelers, these scions of noble houses, were often accompanied by tutors whose gravitas was inversely proportional to their intellectual rigor, men more concerned with their own comfort, and the occasional clandestine assignation than with instilling virtue. Ferdinand observed them all, the gullible young lord eager to shed his coin on trifles and painted smiles, the earnest scholar whose intellectual curiosity was quickly suffocated by the continent's more readily available pleasures, the doting mother who saw only genius in her doltish son. Each was a potential entry in his burgeoning ledger of human folly. His initial forays were cautious, a testing of the waters. He discovered the potent alchemy of flattery, a simple spell that could transform suspicion into trust, and even turn resentment into grudging admiration. He learned that a well-timed sigh of agreement, a feigned awe at a patron's insights, or a cleverly placed compliment on a lady's gown, could unlock doors that wealth alone might struggle to budge. Gambling dens, masquerades, even the hushed corners of grand salons became his classrooms. Here, amid the clinking of glasses and the murmur of foreign tongues, he honed his art. He watched how swiftly reputation could be manufactured, how easily a man's worth was judged by the cut of his coat, the elegance of his equipage, or the boldness of his lies. He saw honest men undone by their own scruples, while charlatans, with enough audacity and a glib tongue, ascended to heights far beyond their desert. It was a revelation the world was not a stage for the virtuous, but a theater for the cunning, where appearances were all and truth a mere inconvenience. In Paris, he mastered the art of elegant deceit, borrowing with a flourish he never intended to repay, befriending those he secretly despised to gain access to their circles. In Italy, he perfected the subtle art of emotional manipulation, weaving tales of woe and grandeur to elicit sympathy or admiration, whichever suited his immediate purpose. The grand tour, meant to refine, to educate, to broaden horizons, became for Ferdinand a crucible. He did not merely observe the scoundrels, he became, in the most profound sense, one of them. He embraced the curriculum, absorbed every lesson in fraud and artifice, and emerged, not as the gentleman his patrons hoped for, but as a virtuoso of deceit, ready to orchestrate his own symphony of chicanery. Europe had indeed educated him, but into a form of villainy more polished and potent than any rustic roguery. Chapter 5. The Art of the Long Game indeed. My dear readers, one cannot fully grasp the intricate machinations of our astute Count Fathom without first appreciating his supreme mastery of what he himself termed the long game. This was not merely a strategy, but a philosophy, a carefully constructed edifice upon which all his grandest deceptions were built. He understood, with a clarity few mortals possess, that the most enduring and substantial harvests were never reaped in haste. Observe Ferdinand as he arrives in a new milieu, let us say, the bustling spa town of Aix, famed for its waters and, more pertinent to our hero, its readily accessible wealth and vanity. Another man, less endowed with foresight and patience, might immediately cast about for a swift mark, a foolish merchant, or a desperate gamester, but not our Fathom. Oh no, his initial foray was not one of overt action, but of profound, almost meditative observation. For weeks, he moved through the social currents like a phantom. He listened intently at coffee houses, loitered discreetly near the card tables, and frequented the most fashionable promenades. His eyes, seemingly casual, missed no detail. He catalogued the subtle tells of avarice, the fleeting glimpses of insecurity beneath a veneer of gaiety, the telltale sighs of an unfulfilled heart. He identified the ambitious parvenu desperate for entree, the lonely widow yearning for companionship, the self-important nobleman easily swayed by flattery. He wasn't searching for a victim, you see. He was searching for asterisk needs asterisk, for asterisk gaps asterisk in the fabric of their lives that he might subtly, artfully fill. His first moves were invariably subtle, almost imperceptible. A timely, unsolicited piece of advice on a minor matter of finance that proved surprisingly astute. A genuine-sounding compliment on a lady's overlooked virtue. A quiet act of generosity towards a struggling artist, publicly acknowledged but privately calculated. He cultivated an aura of cultivated nonchalance, of one above petty concerns, yet always ready to extend a helping hand, a discerning ear. He would speak often of his own fictional misfortunes, not to elicit sympathy, but to establish a shared humanity, a relatable vulnerability that would disarm even the most cautious. He understood that trust was not a gift, but a delicate plant to be nurtured, watered with feigned sincerity and protected from the harsh winds of suspicion. Each small interaction, each seemingly accidental encounter, was a seed planted in fertile ground. The reputation he slowly, painstakingly wove was one of integrity, sagacity, and quiet benevolence, a stark contrast to his true character, yet utterly convincing. He knew that the grandest edifices of deception required the strongest foundations of perceived honesty. For Ferdinand, the true artistry lay not in the asterisk deed asterisk of the con, but in the asterisk prelude asterisk, the elaborate, patient dance of establishing the perfect stage. And as the curtain slowly rose on his carefully crafted persona, the unsuspecting audience would settle in, utterly unaware they were about to witness a masterpiece of villainy, painstakingly prepared. Chapter 6, The Gambler's Mindset. Hark, my esteemed audience, and lend your ears to the relentless clatter of ivory on polished wood, the sharp, decisive snap of dealt cards, and the hushed murmurings that swell into desperate cries or burst forth in brief, exultant whispers. This, my friends, is no mere parlor game. This is the theater of fortune, a hallowed ground where hope battles despair and reason often surrenders to the tantalizing glint of a winning hand. Into such an arena, adorned with velvet, heavy with the scent of fine tobacco and human desperation, and shadowed by the flickering candlelight of a bustling London gaming house, stepped our protagonist, Ferdinand Count Fathom. For within these gilded walls we find not merely games of chance, but a profound study of the human soul laid bare. Here, the gambler's mindset reigns supreme, a peculiar, intoxicating blend of audacious hope, stubborn self-delusion, and a profound, almost spiritual, belief in destiny's inevitable turn. Observe, if you will, the nobleman, his brow furrowed, his purse growing lighter with each anxious breath, yet his eyes still gleam with the conviction that the next roll, the next card, must be his salvation. He whispers prayers to an unseen providence, rationalizing past losses as mere tributes to a grand, impending victory. He sees patterns where none exist, conjures streaks from random chance, and attributes significance to the most trivial omens, each a self-spun thread in the tapestry of his imagined triumph. His world shrinks to the circumference of the card table, his future hangs on the fall of a die, and the dizzying prospect of ultimate gain blinds him utterly to the precipice of his impending ruin. This self-deception, this fervent belief in a personalized fate, is the very fuel of his folly. But Ferdinand, ever the keen observer of human folly, harbored no such tender illusions. His was not the mindset of the hopeful fool, but of the calculating predator. He understood that these games were not merely contests against chance, but against the very psychology of one's opponent. While others chased elusive luck, Fathom studied the tells, the nervous twitch, the dilated pupil, the subtle shift in posture that betrayed a weak hand or a desperate bluff. He saw the game as a cold, analytical machine, fueled by human greed and fear, and he sought only to master its levers. His focus was unclouded by wishful thinking. His strategy was devoid of superstition. He approached the table as a general approaches a battlefield, assessing weaknesses, exploiting vulnerabilities, and maneuvering with a precision that bordered on the diabolical. He witnessed fortunes squandered, reputations ruined, and men driven to the very brink of madness, all within the space of a single breathless hour. He saw the fleeting ecstasy of a sudden gain transform into a ravenous desire for more, pushing winners back to the table until their fleeting triumph turned to bitter ashes. And he, with a cool detachment that bordered on the chilling, often facilitated these downfalls, subtly guiding the desperate to their ruin, or deftly parlaying a small stake into a considerable sum through sheer acumen and an unparalleled understanding of the psychological battlefield. The gambler's mindset, in its purest, most volatile form, was Fathom's classroom, his hunting ground, and the very forge of his cunning. He did not gamble, he orchestrated. He did not hope, he calculated. And in that crucial distinction lay his mastery, and the chilling truth of his character. Chapter 7. Dr. Fathom's Quack Medicine. And so, gentlemen, our intrepid Ferdinand, having thoroughly exhausted the wellspring of his Parisian follies, and finding the landscape of his credit barren, wisely concluded that a change of clime and character was in order. London, that grand crucible of ambition and gullibility, beckoned. Here he would shed the skin of the discredited schemer and don the robes of a savant. Observe, if you please, the birth of Dr. Fathom. No longer a mere fortune hunter, but a physician of profound, if self-proclaimed, learning. His chambers, situated with discerning taste, exuded an air of exotic mystery, a globe, ancient tomes, dried herbs of dubious provenance. Patients, particularly the idle and the anxious, were welcomed into an atmosphere ripe with portent. His method was a symphony of calculated artifice and theatrical grandiosity. He spoke in hushed, profound tones, liberally sprinkling his discourse with Latin aphorisms and medical cant that dazzled but rarely elucidated. His gaze, piercing and seemingly sagacious, would scan the patient's face, not for medical symptoms, but for character, a subtle tell of their wealth, their anxieties, their capacity for credulity, and indeed, their very desire to believe. "Ah, my dear madam," he might intone, stroking his chin with feigned gravity, "a most intricate constitution, indeed. The humors, alas, are quite out of their natural harmony. A vitiated spleen, perhaps, or a melancholic vapor ascending from the diaphragm. His panacea, a universal elixir, of course! A secret formula, purportedly distilled from rare botanicals gathered in the remote Carpathians, passed down through generations of esteemed healers. Its efficacy, he swore, was beyond question, though its ingredients remained a closely guarded secret, known only to the Fathom lineage. A pinch of this, a drop of that carefully measured, meticulously bottled, and priced at a sum befitting its mythical potency. But Fathom's true genius lay in his network. His valets, his laundresses, his very footmen became his eyes and ears, gleaning snippets of gossip, anxieties, and ailments from the city's populace. He would then, with astonishing prescience, tailor his diagnoses to perfectly mirror the patient's deepest fears or most cherished hopes. Thus, the hypochondriac was assured of a lurking, insidious malady, curable only by Fathom's unique intervention. The genuinely ill, desperate for a cure where others had failed, found solace in his grand pronouncements and promises. Failures. Oh, those were swiftly attributed to the patient's lamentable want of faith, their failure to adhere strictly to his complex regimen, or the inherent, unyielding obstinacy of the disease itself. Dr. Fathom, however, remained untouched, his reputation swelling with each successive and profitable delusion. His purse, once skeletal, now began to bulge, a testament to the enduring power of hope, and the even greater power of calculated deceit. Chapter 8. The Seduction of Celinda. Ah, sweet Celinda. A name whispered by the winds of fortune, now about to be seized by the currents of malevolent design. Our Count Fathom, ever the architect of ruin, had, by the close of the preceding chapter, fixed his predatory gaze upon this young woman, whose innocence, alas, shone with a brilliance that only served to attract his dark machinations. Observe, if you will, the artifice of his approach. Fathom understood that overt passion, when unwarranted, merely repels. Instead, he wove a tapestry of calculated admiration and feigned solicitude. He presented himself not as a suitor inflamed by desire, but as a kindred spirit, a discerning intellect drawn to Celinda's modest virtues and gentle disposition. He spoke of her with a reverential respect that flattered her vanity, yet in a manner so subtle, so seemingly artless, that it bypassed the natural defenses of suspicion. Celinda, fresh from the quietude of a sheltered life, found herself adrift in a sea of novel sensations. The Count's attentions, initially a source of bemusement, quickly blossomed into a profound, if nascent, affection. He would find occasion to commend her taste in music, her delicate needlework, the thoughtful turn of her phrases. Each compliment, delivered with a mournful sigh or a lingering glance that suggested a secret, profound sorrow, struck deep into her impressionable heart. He painted himself a soul wounded by the world's injustices, seeking solace in her purity, and Celinda, in her guileless compassion, believed she could offer him that balm. He penned her letters exquisite in their prose, filled with sentiments of esteem and, crucially, a veiled declaration of profound, yet chaste adoration. He never spoke of marriage, for that would have introduced a layer of expectation too concrete for his fluid deceptions. Instead, he spoke of souls intertwined, of intellectual harmonies, of a companionship that transcended earthly bonds, a strategy designed to bypass her guardians and capture her imagination. Slowly, imperceptibly, Celinda began to live for these stolen moments, for Fathom's presence, for the gentle pressure of his hand on hers during a stroll, for the shared glances across a crowded room that spoke volumes in their silence. She believed herself understood, cherished, loved in a manner beyond the commonplace. Her affection, pure and untainted, became the very soil in which Fathom's poisonous seeds took root. He had not merely seduced her affections, he had seduced her trust, her faith, and, most tragically, her very perception of reality. The stage was thus set, not for a grand romance, but for a slow, agonizing descent into disillusion, all orchestrated by the master puppeteer, Ferdinand, Count Fathom. Chapter 9. The Ghost in the Machine. The scene opens in a quaint, if somewhat faded, country inn, the evening light painting long shadows across its rustic common room. Ferdinand, Count Fathom, impeccably dressed yet with an air of thoughtful detachment, sips a modest wine, his gaze, like a predator's, sweeping over the local gentry gathered. Ah, observe him now, ladies and gentlemen, For here begins a subtle ballet of deceit, a prelude to ruin danced not on grand stages, but in the quiet chambers of men's trust. Ferdinand, our Machiavellian maestro, understood that the grandest edifices of fortune are often built upon the whisper of a secret, the vulnerability gleaned from an unwitting soul. He was not one for brute force, his was the art of the ghost in the machine, an invisible hand guiding the levers of human affairs. Fathom's eyes settle upon a portly, somewhat self-important gentleman, Dr. Potion, the local physician, holding forth on some minor ailment of a local squire. The good doctor, a man puffed with provincial consequence, presented himself as the perfect conduit. Fathom, ever the strategist, knew direct inquiry would raise suspicion. No, the path to Amelia's heart, or rather, to the dismantling of her very existence, lay through a carefully cultivated alliance. Fathom approaching Dr. Potion with a deferential bow, a faint, almost imperceptible air of melancholic refinement about him. Doctor, your discourse on the humors is quite captivating. I find myself quite unwell, a persistent malaise of the spirit, perhaps, compounded by travel. Might I impose upon your wisdom? Dr. Potion, puffing out his chest, a man of refined sensibility. Of course, my dear Sir Dr. Potion, at your service. Tell me what vexes your constitution. Fathom, feigning a delicate sensibility, described symptoms so vague, so steeped in poetic ennui, that the physician, eager to impress, prescribed a regimen of rest and mild elixirs. This was merely the overture. Over subsequent visits, Fathom, with an exquisite blend of flattery and feigned interest in local history, began to weave his invisible net. Fathom, leaning in confidentially during a private consultation, a look of profound sympathy on his face. Indeed, doctor, this village possesses a peculiar charm, a quiet beauty that belies, I imagine, many an untold sorrow. I observed, during my recent promenade, a young lady of such exquisite grace, yet shadowed by an air of poignant melancholy. A Miss Amelia, I believe. Her countenance spoke of a lineage both noble and, dare I say, touched by adversity. Dr. Potion, his eyes lighting up at the mention of local gossip. Ah, Miss Amelia! A tragic tale, sir, truly. The daughter of the late Count, a man of considerable estate now sadly diminished. Her mother, too, a woman of great beauty, but plagued by ill health and, alas, a series of misfortunes that drained their coffers. A family much beloved, yet much afflicted. The Count, you see, was overly trusting, led astray by unscrupulous men, and so, the floodgates opened. The good doctor, flattered by Fathom's rapt attention and carefully placed questions, divulged every detail: the family's reduced circumstances, the vulnerabilities of their finances, the late Count's trusting nature, the mother's delicate health, Amelia's own quiet pride. Each piece of information, innocently shared, was a cog in the machine Fathom was assembling. He was the ghost, unseen and unheard, pulling strings from within the very fabric of their social world. He built no walls, wielded no swords. Instead, he slipped into the delicate mechanisms of human connection, turning trust into a weapon, and kindness into a prelude to despair. The machine of their lives, once governed by gentle happenstance, was now subtly, imperceptibly, being recalibrated by the phantom hand of Ferdinand. Fathom offers a polite, grateful smile to the doctor, his eyes, however, betraying a glint of chilling satisfaction. The doctor departed, pleased with his new, distinguished acquaintance. Fathom, however, remained, his mind already spinning the raw threads of information into a silken snare. The ghost had found its machine, and the harvest of misfortune had only just begun. Chapter 10. London, the ultimate hunting ground. And so, our astute adventurer, Ferdinand, Count Fathom, having traversed the continent with a trail of bewildered creditors and smitten, poorer ladies in his wake, at last set his sights upon that grand, tumultuous heart of Albion, London. Oh, London, a city not merely of brick and mortar, but a very ecosystem of desires, a sprawling theater where fortunes were made and lost with dizzying rapidity, where anonymity offered both shield and sword, and where the unwary were ripe for plucking by a hand as deft as his. He arrived not with the awe of a bumpkin, nor the trepidation of a timid soul, but with the cool, appraising gaze of a seasoned hunter surveying a new bountiful preserve. The teeming streets, a labyrinthine dance of sedan chairs, jostling hawkers and hurried gentlemen, presented themselves not as a challenge, but as a tableau of opportunity, each individual a potential piece in his grand design. His keen eye swiftly catalogued the endless parade, the effeminate fops, eager for novelty and easily swayed, the stern-faced merchants, their covetousness thinly veiled by their suits of broadcloth, the languid ladies of quality, adrift in their own vanities, yearning for admiration that Fathom, with his practiced air of foreign nobility, could so readily supply. He saw in every powdered wig a potential purse, every simpering glance a vulnerable heart, every display of provincial wealth a trove of negotiable assets waiting to be liberated. His mind, ever a tireless engine of stratagem, began to spin its intricate webs even before his hired hackney had deposited him in the clamor of Charing Cross, amidst the cacophony of a city perpetually abuzz. He understood, with an instinct refined by years of predatory practice, that in this colossal metropolis, appearance was currency, and a well-spun fiction more valuable than truth itself. Here, where a man could reinvent himself with the ease of changing a waistcoat, Fathom knew his talents would flourish. The sheer volume of wealth, the endless churn of social interaction, the preoccupation with status and gossip, these were the fertile grounds in which his seeds of deceit would take root and blossom into bountiful harvests. He would not merely exist in London. He would dominate its social labyrinth, penetrating its most exclusive circles with the audacious confidence of a true genius of deception. His continental escapades, mere skirmishes in comparison, had prepared him for this grand campaign. London was not just a city, it was the ultimate hunting ground, where the prizes were richer, the stakes higher, and the game infinitely more thrilling. He would assume his most polished demeanor, deploy his most captivating charm, and with meticulous care, select his victims from the vast, unsuspecting herd, proving himself, once more, the undisputed master of artifice and the architect of others' ruin, all beneath the indifferent gaze of this magnificent, predatory city, a city which, to Fathom, seemed to nod in tacit approval of his cunning. Chapter 11. The betrayer betrayed the moon. A conspiratorial eye watched as Count Fathom slipped back into Madame de Grotesque's mansion. A tender farewell to the wealthy widow concluded, his heart, usually cold, pulsed with excitement. Tonight, he would relieve her of her celebrated jewels. He moved silently through the opulent darkness to her boudoir, a hidden service door his secret accomplice. Beneath a loose floorboard, nestled in velvet, was the prize. Fathom's nimble fingers prized it open. He extracted the pouch, his breath catching in avarice. But as his grip tightened, an odd lightness struck him. Into the moonlight, he tipped the contents. Instead of a dazzling cascade of diamonds and emeralds, a handful of dull pebbles, painted glass, and tarnished copper coins tumbled out. A cheap jest. His blood ran cold. The smirk vanished, replaced by a scowl of utter bewilderment, then dawning horror. Looking for something, Ferdinand. A voice cool and utterly devoid of its usual simpering affection, cut through the silence. Fathom whirled, clutching the worthless trinkets. Framed in the doorway, lamp aloft, stood Madame de Grotesque. No longer the teary-eyed duped widow, her eyes now gleamed with sharp, intelligent malice. Her lips, usually pouting, were drawn into a thin, knowing smile. "Madame," he stammered, his composure shattered. She advanced slowly. "You thought me a fool, Count Fathom. A purse to be emptied, a heart toyed with, then discarded." She gestured to the pebbles. "A small token of my esteem for your peculiar talents. The real gems are safe. And you, my dear Ferdinand, are quite caught." A sudden clang echoed. The service door, bolted from outside. The very trap he had set for countless others had sprung upon him. The master betrayer betrayed. The irony, a bitter draught, burned in his throat. Chapter 12. The unraveling. The evening air, once heavy with the perfume of jasmine and the harmonious strains of a chamber orchestra, now seemed to crackle with an unspoken tension, a foreboding hum that only the truly perceptive might discern. Ferdinand, Count Fathom, resplendent in emerald, silk, and pearls, held court amidst a throng of admiring Parisian gentry. His latest conquest, the plumply dowered Mademoiselle d'Aubais, hung on his every whispered anecdote, her heart, he presumed, ripe for plucking. He spoke of his ancestral estates, his profound grief for a fictitious lost sister, and the arduous campaigns he had, with heroic modesty, endured. A servant, as if guided by the capricious hand of fate itself, announced Monsieur Henry Valois, from Lyon. Fathom's urbane smile faltered, a mere fraction, but enough for a keen eye to detect. Monsieur Dubois, a man of booming geniality, clapped his hands. "Henry, my dear fellow, what a delightful surprise!" As Monsieur Valois, a shrewd-eyed merchant of modest mien, was ushered into the salon, his gaze, like a predator's, swept the room. It landed, with disconcerting precision, upon the Count. A flicker of recognition, or was it something more akin to disbelief, crossed his features. Fathom, ever the actor, recovered swiftly. He offered a polite, if somewhat stiff, nod. "A pleasure to make your acquaintance, Monsieur Valois." Valois, however, did not return the courtesy in kind. His eyes, now narrowed, surveyed Fathom's elaborate attire, then returned to his face, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. "Valois, you say?" He mused aloud, his voice cutting through the polite murmur of conversation. And here I had known you as Monsieur Dubois' trusted agent, the one who absconded with the silk consignment from Avignon, or perhaps the impecunious gambler, Monsieur Fisher, who owed the entire syndicate of Rouen A. But of course, those were but fleeting aliases, were they not? Count asterisk. The delicate tinkling of Mademoiselle Dubois' laughter died in her throat. Monsieur Dubois' genial smile dissolved into a mask of bewilderment. A hush descended, thick and suffocating. All eyes, moments ago fixed on the dazzling Count, now darted between the impeccably dressed Fathom and the frankly spoken Valois. Fathom's face, usually a picture of aristocratic nonchalance, became a canvas of carefully controlled panic. A flush crept up his neck, and his pearl-encrusted fingers instinctively clenched the hilt of his dress sword. "Monsieur, you mistake me for another," he declared, his voice a shade too high, a shade too strained. "I assure you, I am Ferdinand, Count Fathom, of ancient lineage and unblemished repute." Valois merely scoffed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "Unblemished. My dear Count, the only thing unblemished about your reputation is its remarkable consistency in scoundrelly dealings. Did you not fleece old Madame Burton of her inheritance in Marseille, or persuade young Monsieur Beaumont to invest his entire fortune in a phantom silver mine?" He took a step closer, his voice rising, clear as a bell. "You are no count, sir, but a common impostor, a parasite who preys on the unsuspecting." The unraveling was complete. The gilded cage of Ferdinand's deceit, so meticulously constructed, now lay in shattered pieces, its tarnished reality exposed for all to see. The jasmine scent turned sour, the music a discordant memory. Mademoiselle Dubois gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Monsieur Dubois, scarlet-faced, stared at his erstwhile guest, the truth of Valois' words chilling him to the bone. The air itself seemed to recoil from the stripped-bare villain. Chapter 13. Rock Bottom, the Debtor's Prison. Ah, my dear readers, were you not just marveling at the audacity, the sheer theatrical genius of our protagonist, Count Fathom? One moment, he was navigating the treacherous waters of high society, weaving webs of deceit with the elegance of a spider crafting its silken snare. The next, the web collapsed, and our nimble spider, Ferdinand, found himself entangled, not in the gilded threads of his own making, but in the iron grip of a reality far grimmer than any he had ever fabricated. The transition, you see, was abrupt, jarring. From the velvet-lined carriages and the scent of exotic perfumes, he was plunged into a world defined by the clanging of iron gates and the reek of stale air, of despair and unwashed bodies. No longer Count Fathom, the celebrated foreigner, but simply Fathom, a debtor, a number, a statistic amongst a throng of forgotten souls. The very name, once a whisper of intrigue, now a mark of ignominy. Picture it, if you will, the chill that crept into his bones, far deeper than any winter's frost, for it was the cold of utter destitution, of hope extinguished. The clamor of the prison yard, a cacophony of groans, curses, and the hollow laughter of those whose spirits had long since broken. These were his new companions, not the glittering fops and painted ladies, but the wretches, the broken, the dispossessed. Each face a testament to fortune's cruelty, each story a lament. Fathom, ever the actor, may have tried to maintain a facade, but even his practiced countenance must have cracked under the weight of such abject misery. The walls, thick with the grime of ages, seemed to press in, suffocating his grand ambitions, his intricate schemes. Here his charm was useless, his wit a dull blade against the unyielding stone. This, my friends, was his rock bottom. Not a metaphorical fall from grace, but a literal descent into the abyss of the debtor's prison. A place where time stood still, or perhaps, simply ceased to matter. A place designed not merely to confine the body, but to crush the spirit. And as the heavy, oaken door creaked shut behind him, severing him from the world he knew, one could almost hear the echo of a grand design failing, a life unraveling, leaving only the stark, unvarnished truth of Ferdinand Fathom, stripped bare of all his pretenses. What new stratagems would this crucible forge? What desperate measures would necessity demand? The very air hung thick with unanswered questions, and the chilling promise of a future far darker than any he had yet encountered. Chapter 14. A glimmer of conscience, observe, if you will, the Count Fathom, that singular confection of artifice and ambition. He stood, not in the triumphant glare of the drawing room, but in the veiled penumbra of a narrow London alley, his eyes fixed upon a solitary window above. Within that humble pane, a candle flickered, casting long, wavering shadows that danced upon the face of Monimia. He had orchestrated her descent with the meticulous hand of a master craftsman, the whisper of calumny, the calculated betrayal, the slow, insidious erosion of her good name and dwindling fortune. Now she sat before a cold hearth, her delicate hands clasped in a posture of utter despair, a silent testament to the raw devastation he had so callously wrought. Her beauty, though dimmed by profound sorrow, still possessed an ethereal quality that, for a fleeting instant, pierced the usual armor of his profound indifference. And then it happened. Not a thunderclap, nor a revelation descending from the heavens, but a subtle, unbidden tremor, deep within the breast he had long believed utterly impervious to such tender frailties. A prick, keen and unexpectedly sharp, like a sliver of ice infiltrating the very core of his being. He saw not merely a victim, but the vibrant ghost of her former self, the trusting smile, the innocent, unwavering gaze, the boundless belief in human goodness he had so avariciously exploited. A strange warmth, then a chilling wave spread through him, unsettling his very bones. Was it a ripple of genuine regret, a fleeting apprehension for his immortal soul, that theoretical construct he had so often mocked? He, Ferdinand, who had scoffed at such effeminate sentimentalities, felt a distinct and uncomfortable tightening in his throat. The ease with which he had dispatched others to their fates, the cool detachment of his machinations, now seemed, for the briefest of moments, utterly repugnant. He pictured her in happier, more hopeful days, and the stark, brutal contrast with her current abject misery struck him with a force that momentarily dislodged his usual self-approbation. He shifted his weight, suddenly uneasy in his solitude. This unbidden guest, this glimmer, was an unwelcome, disorienting intruder. "Pish," he murmured, though the word lacked its customary conviction, sounding hollow even to his own ears. Sentimentality is the opium of fools, a weakness best left to the simple-minded. He quickly told himself she was naive, that the world was a brutal, self-serving arena, and his own survival merely necessitated a pragmatic, if ruthless, approach. He had merely accelerated an inevitable fall for one so ill-equipped to navigate society's treacherous currents. Yet, the indelible image of her silent tears clung stubbornly to his inner vision, a persistent, irritating burr. The discomfort, however, was as transient as a morning mist caught by a sudden breeze. With a decisive shake of his head, a conscious and deliberate effort of will, he banished the unwelcome specter. The hard, polished veneer, so carefully cultivated over years of cunning and deceit, began swiftly to reform. The brief fissure in his resolve closed, leaving barely a superficial scar upon his hardened conscience. He straightened his finely tailored coat, adjusted his powdered wig, and strode forth into the deeper shadows of the night, once again the unrepentant architect of his own dark destiny. But for a flicker, a breath, a moment suspended in the chilling urban darkness, even Ferdinand Count Fathom had acknowledged, however unwillingly, the profound and troubling weight of his own shadow. Chapter 15. The return of Rinaldo. The soft lamplight of the salon, ordinarily a comforting cloak for Ferdinand's sophisticated machinations, seemed that evening to cast shadows of unwelcome omen. For weeks, indeed for months, the Count had trod the opulent carpets of fashionable society with an unburdened step, his pockets jingling with the spoils of carefully executed deceptions, his reputation, though built on quicksand, standing firm in the estimation of the credulous. Rinaldo, that troublesome beacon of probity and honor, was to Ferdinand's immense relief, considered utterly and irrevocably vanished, swallowed by the vagaries of a perilous journey, or perhaps, as Ferdinand had subtly encouraged whispers, by his own ill-advised romantic fervor. But fate, that mischievous spinner of human destiny, rarely permits a villain such unalloyed triumph for long. It was amid a company of particularly influential dowagers, whose pearls gleamed as brightly as their collective ignorance, that the first tremor of disquiet rippled through the Count's well-guarded composure. A footman, pale as statuary marble, delivered a message to the hostess with a tremor in his hand that suggested more than mere haste. And then a gasp. A hush fell heavy and profound, rendering Ferdinand's artful anecdote utterly obsolete in the sudden void. His keen eyes, ever watchful for the shifting currents of rumor, detected the source of the commotion. Standing at the very threshold of the grand hall, framed by the intricate carvings of the doorway, was a figure that, for Ferdinand, had long been relegated to the realm of troublesome specters. Rinaldo, not the ghost of him nor a wretched, broken shade, but Rinaldo himself, perhaps a little leaner, a touch more weathered by travel and adversity, yet radiating that same unyielding rectitude that had ever been Fathom's antithesis. His raiment, though modest, was clean, and his gaze, as it swept the room, held an intensity that seemed to pierce the very artifice of the gathering. Ferdinand felt a prickle, cold and sharp, beneath his silken waistcoat. The very air around him seemed to thicken with unspoken questions, with dawning realizations. The edifice of his recent prosperity, so carefully erected brick by false brick, now seemed to teeter precariously. Ronaldo's presence, though he uttered not a single word, was a thundering declaration, a silent indictment that threatened to unravel the meticulously woven tapestry of deceit. Here was the truth, unadorned and undeniable, returned from the supposed oblivion, not to accuse with fury, but merely to be asterisk. And in his simple, vital existence, he laid bare the rotten foundations of Ferdinand's triumphs, promising a reckoning that no amount of Fathom's cunning could forever postpone. The game, it seemed, had just grown infinitely more perilous. Chapter 16. The Confessions int Marquis de Valois study night strisk. The opulent study of the Marquis de Valois is aglow with firelight and soft candelabra. The air, heavy with tobacco, hangs between the Marquis, leaning back in his fauteuil, and Ferdinand Count Fathom. Marquis de Valois low, measured Count, your reputation precedes you. Whispers, like distant thunder, suggest a past less conventional than your present grandeur implies. Fathom feigning a sigh, a flicker of sorrow. Alas, Marquis, rumor often distorts truth. Yet, I am not one to shrink from candor. My heart, heavy with recollections, yearns for an ear as discerning as yours. A confession perhaps is due, not of guilt but of a certain pragmatism. Marquis de Valois pragmatism, Count, a delicate euphemism. Proceed. My ear, though accustomed to the grander deceptions of statecraft, is open. Fathom leaning forward, his voice gaining insidious strength. You speak of my past. The foundations of my fortune were not laid with an honest journeyman's trowel, but with fingers that understood the unseen weaknesses in the edifices of human trust. I confess, there was a widow, ripe for the plucking of considerable means, and more considerable vanity. She yearned for consequence, for a title. I supplied it. A fabricated pedigree, a crest conjured from ether, a lineage noble enough to impress, yet obscure enough to defy verification. Marquis de Valois low chuckle, a common enough stratagem. Most aristocracy is built on such fancies. What made yours so remarkable? Fathom a sardonic twist to his lips, losing feigned humility the depth of her conviction, Marquis. The sheer pleasure derived from observing her believe, with every fiber, a fiction woven solely for her undoing. I spun tales of ancestral castles, of chivalry, of vast, if temporarily inaccessible, estates. I flattered her egregious taste, her lamentable wit, her decaying beauty, until she saw in me not a suitor, but a divine validation of her pathetic self-importance. When the investment came for these phantom inheritances a mere trifle, she believed she signed away her fortune with astonishing alacrity. Her subsequent ruin, her despair, it was not, I confess, entirely without a certain aesthetic appeal. The unraveling of such intricate self-deception can be quite instructive. Fathom leans back, a faint smirk replacing all pretense of remorse. The Marquis watches him, a slow smile spreading across his face. Marquis de Valois raising a hand, his voice tinged with distinct appreciation. Enough, Count. Quite enough. Your pragmatism, as you term it, is of a most singular nature, one that, I confess, I find myself rather admiring. Perhaps after all, our complex bouquets are not so dissimilar. A knowing silence descends, thick with unspoken understanding and the promise of future machinations. Scene end. Chapter 17. The Path to Atonement. The scene opens in a stark, unadorned room. Ferdinand, once the magnificent Count Fathom, is now a man stripped bare, his face etched with hardship, his costly attire replaced by humble, worn garments. The storyteller's voice, resonant with experience, begins. Ah, Ferdinand, Ferdinand. How swiftly the glittering edifice of your cunning crumbles when ill fortune truly strikes. Here we find our erstwhile Count, no longer the master of deception, but a prisoner of his own making, cloistered within walls that mock his past grandiosity. His silks, his conspiracies, his triumphant swindles all receded into a bitter, distant echo. What remains is a man forced, at last, to reckon with the stark inventory of his soul. Fathom had long embraced avarice and duplicity, dismissing morality as a weakness. But now, in this oppressive silence, far from the society he exploited, a different sound intrudes the relentless, accusing pulse of his neglected conscience. He gazes out a grimy window, the leaden sky mirroring his internal desolation. He recalls the faces of those he wronged, the maiden whose trust he shattered, the benefactor whose kindness he repaid with betrayal, the companions whose fortunes he pilfered. Each memory, a shard of ice piercing his once impervious heart. No longer could he dismiss them as mere collateral damage. Their cries, long silenced by his self-serving narrative, now found terrifying voice in his solitude. A humble figure enters a jailer or benevolent visitor bearing a meager meal. Their eyes meet. In the visitor's quiet gaze, Fathom sees not judgment, but unwavering pity. It is this, perhaps, more than any physical privation, that cracks his self-delusion. Pity, unlike scorn, demands introspection, a recognition of shared humanity, even with those one has sought to subjugate. For the first time, Ferdinand feels a pang not of self-preservation, but of genuine regret. A question stirs: can the ruinous path he forged be retraced? Can the intricate knots of malice he wove be undone? This, dear reader, is not the Fathom we knew. This is a Fathom poised on the precipice of a terrifying yet necessary journey. The path to atonement is not paved with gold or cunning. It is a rugged, solitary ascent, demanding humility, penance, and a willingness to confront the very demons one has cultivated. And for Ferdinand, the first agonizing step has just been taken. Chapter 18, A New Identity. The flickering candlelight of the small, anonymous inn room played across Ferdinand's face, illuminating the sharp planes and thoughtful brow. A half-finished glass of claret stood before him, its ruby depths mirroring the cunning glint in his eyes. The scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke drifted through the open window, a humble backdrop to the grand machinations unfolding within his mind. Ferdinand Count Fathom, he murmured, testing the name on his tongue, a taste that had grown stale, perhaps even a trifle perilous, in recent weeks. The last affair, a delicate entanglement with the Dowager Duchess's pearls and her exceedingly naive nephew, had concluded with more haste than grace. Indeed, the air of London, for all its boundless opportunities, had begun to feel a shade too warm beneath his collar. A fresh canvas was required, a clean slate upon which to inscribe new triumphs, new deceits. He leaned back, a faint smile playing on his lips. This was not an act of flight, no. Ferdinand Fathom never fled, he merely repositioned. He shed old skin, not out of fear, but out of strategic necessity, much like the prudent serpent. The world, he mused, was but a grand theater, and he, its most versatile player. To cling to a single role, however brilliantly performed, was to limit one's repertoire, to squander potential. A new identity. The words hummed with delicious possibility. What mask would best serve his current objectives? The flamboyant foreign nobleman, while alluring, drew too much scrutiny. The pious scholar, too sedentary. No, something subtle yet substantial. A man of quiet dignity, perhaps touched by a melancholic past, yet possessing an undeniable air of inherited consequence. A gentleman whose means were self-evident, precluding the need for overt display, and whose reserved nature might discourage too eager an inquiry into his provenance. He settled upon it Monsieur de Melville, a name that whispered of French refinement, yet not so exotic as to be suspicious. He would be a man of independent fortune, recently returned from a grand tour perhaps. He carried with him a certain learned sadness, a gentle world weariness that would invite sympathy rather than suspicion. His attire would be impeccably tailored, but understated, his manner courteous but distant, his conversation intelligent but cautious. He would cultivate a slight stoop, perhaps, from too much contemplation in libraries, and a sigh that spoke of profound, unspoken sorrows. This identity, he realized, offered exquisite advantages. It suggested a depth of character that would appeal to the sentimental, a financial stability that would entice the avaricious, and a quiet mystery that would intrigue the curious, all while revealing precisely nothing of the true Ferdinand. He would lament the fickleness of fortune, speak vaguely of lost loves, and hint at philosophical disillusionment. All lies, of course, but lies woven with such exquisite threads of plausibility that they would become, for his audience, more real than any truth. He raised his glass. To Monsieur de Melville, he toasted the empty room, his voice soft, almost affectionate. May he find more compliant souls than his predecessor. The stage was set. The play, with its new protagonist, was about to begin, and Ferdinand Fathom, ever the puppeteer, would merely pull the strings from behind the elegant facade. The scent of opportunity, now mingled with the faint aroma of fresh parchment and new beginnings, filled the small room. Chapter 19. The Nature of Evil. Ah, my dear listeners, draw close, and let us peer into the shadowed corners of the human heart. For tonight we contemplate a subject as old as time, yet perpetually new in its manifestations, the very nature of evil. It is not, as some would imagine, a monstrous entity with cloven hooves and fiery breath, bursting forth from the underworld to wreak havoc. No, that would be too simple, too easily identified, and therefore too readily resisted. The true evil, I assure you, is far more subtle, far more insidious, and therefore far more dangerous. It often begins, you see, not with a roar, but with a whisper. A whisper of self-interest disguised as prudence, a fleeting thought of injustice rationalized as righteous indignation, a small compromise with integrity excused as mere pragmatism. It wears the mask of necessity, of ambition, even of virtue. How many a scoundrel, in his own distorted mirror, believes himself a victim of circumstance, a clever navigator in a world of fools, or even a benevolent puppet master guiding lesser mortals to their supposed destiny? Consider the man who, with a charming smile and an outstretched hand, weaves a web of deceit. His eyes betray no malice, his voice no tremor of perfidy. He dines at your table, shares your wine, perhaps even offers counsel, all the while sharpening the very blade that will sever your prosperity, your reputation, or your peace of mind. This, my friends, is the chilling essence of it. Evil thrives not in open combat, but in the dark recesses of trust betrayed, of confidence abused, of vulnerability exploited under the guise of friendship. The conscience, that tender plant, is bruised but not broken by the initial transgression. Yet, with each successive deviation from the path of honor, it hardens, thickens, until it becomes an impenetrable hide. The perpetrator, once perhaps capable of remorse, learns to rationalize every base impulse, every cruel act. He casts blame upon circumstance, upon the victim's supposed folly, upon the very world that he so deftly manipulates. He constructs an elaborate inner narrative where he is the rightful arbiter, and others merely pawns in his intricate, self-serving game. The true terror of this pervasive force is its self-deception, its uncanny capacity to transform vice into virtue, avarice into prudence, and outright cruelty into a necessary discipline. It preys upon the good intentions of others, twisting their openness into vulnerabilities, their generosity into opportunities for exploitation. And society, alas, often aids and abets it, mistaking shrewdness for wisdom, superficial charm for genuine character. We are too often dazzled by the glitter, quite blind to the corrosive rust beneath. So, when next you encounter a character of questionable moral fiber, do not expect a demon with exaggerated features. Expect a man, perhaps outwardly polished and smooth, yet inwardly corroded, who has convinced himself that his self-serving machinations are merely the clever, inevitable navigation of a flawed world. For this, I assure you, is where the most dangerous evils truly lie, not in the fantastical horrors of fable, but in the subtle, pervasive rot of the human heart that has forgotten how to feel, and learned only how to take. Chapter 20. The seductive power of the anti-hero. Ah, dear reader, we arrive at a most curious juncture in our tale of Ferdinand, Count Fathom. Here, the very air thickens with a perfume of deceit so potent, so artfully blended, that even the most discerning nose might mistake it for virtue. For in this chapter, we witness not crude machinations, but the subtle, insidious mastery of an anti-hero truly in his element. Imagine Fathom, having navigated past deceptions, now casting his gaze upon a new shore. Let us speak of the amiable, impressionable young Mr. Trencher, recently come into a modest inheritance and, more dangerously, an abundance of goodwill. Trencher, open of countenance and heart unfurnished with suspicion, presented the canvas upon which Fathom delighted to paint his manipulations. Fathom, ever the chameleon, approached not with conqueror's swagger, but cultivated humility. He was one who had suffered slings, yet emerged with spirit unbroken, his honor or semblance thereof intact. Over indifferent claret, he'd speak with melancholy of past injustices, betrayed friendships, noble lineage brought low by fickle fortune. Never self-pity, but stoic resignation, a philosophical acceptance that magnified his supposed inner strength in Trencher's admiring eyes. He praised Trencher's nascent business acumen with sincerity utterly genuine, lending unsolicited, sagacious advice. He painted visions of mutual prosperity, of ventures requiring merely capital, and a partner of unflinching integrity qualities he subtly implied he found in Trencher, and offered in himself. Trencher, flattered, warmed by a refined gentleman whose misfortunes lent him tragic romance, found himself eager to fall under Fathom's spell. The Count, with a slight sigh and a timed glance at an empty glass, would introduce a small temporary inconvenience, a sudden, pressing need only Trencher's timely help could alleviate. It was never a direct plea for money, but a shared problem, a hurdle for their grand future, to be overcome together. Trencher, swept up in the vision, eager to prove loyalty to such a captivating, seemingly virtuous soul, offered his hand, his credit, his very fortune, unaware he tightened the silken cords of his own undoing. This, dear reader, is the very essence of Fathom's dreadful genius, to make his victims believe they are choosing their own delightful ruin. Chapter 21. Social satire and Smollett's world friends, gather close, and let us journey once more into the labyrinthine mind of Tobias Smollett, that most shrewd and unsparing of observers. We speak of Ferdinand Count Fathom, not merely as a tale of roguery, but as a glittering, poisoned mirror held up to the very soul of the 18th century. Here, the narrative is less about the Count's specific escapades, though those are indeed wonderfully wicked, than about the theatrical spectacle of human folly he so expertly illuminates. Smollett, with the surgeon's precise hand and the satirist's scathing wit, carves open the pretensions of an age. Fathom, our charming villain, is not just a character, he is a scalpel. He moves through the salons of London, the spas of Bath, the gambling dens and drawing rooms, exposing every layer of affectation. Consider the fops, fluttering about with their absurd fashion and vacuous pronouncements, the ladies of supposed refinement, whose virtue is as brittle as their porcelain complexions, the legal men, tangled in their own webs of chicanery, and the physicians, more concerned with their fees than their patients' lives. These are not merely caricatures, though exaggeration is Smollett's favored brushstroke. No, these are archetypes, vividly brought to life, representing the endemic hypocrisy of a society obsessed with appearances. Smollett's world, through Fathom's eyes, is one where birthright and inherited wealth often mask an utter absence of merit, where morality is a convenient cloak, and honor a mere word to be bandied about by the disingenuous. The beauty of Smollett's satire lies in its immediacy. He doesn't lecture, he shows. We witness Fathom's manipulations not just as triumphs of villainy, but as indictments of the gullibility and inherent corruption of those he ensnares. The grandames, eager to be seduced by a title, the merchants, desperate for social elevation, the young heirs, so easily parted from their fortunes by a sharp tongue and a deceptive smile. Each interaction is a miniature play, a vignette revealing the rotten core beneath the gilded surface. It is a world where everyone is in some way performing, and Fathom is simply the most skilled actor, unmasking the amateur theatrics of the rest. His journey through Europe becomes a grand tour of human absurdity, each city, each court, each social gathering, another stage upon which the universal weaknesses of pride, avarice, and vanity are played out with relentless, often comical precision. And as we laugh at the antics, or perhaps grimace at the chilling realism, Smollett whispers in our ear, "Look closer, dear reader." How much has truly changed? The mirror he held up still reflects, perhaps, a flicker of our own world. Chapter 22, Fathom's Legacy, a warning. Gentle reader, how oft does the glittering facade of vice entrap the unwary soul? How many a lamb, lured by a serpent's charm, has met its ruin ere the truth was known? Our Ferdinand, Count Fathom, that master of dissimulation, had by now cast his shadow across many a verdant pasture, leaving naught but scorched earth in his wake. Yet his artifice, though cunning, could not always withstand the piercing gaze of those who had learned wisdom in the school of bitter experience. It is to such a scene, amidst the clamor and gossip of a London coffee house, that our tale now turns. Young Mr. Biddulph, fresh from his estates, a very picture of ingenuous prosperity, held forth on the virtues of a certain Count de Melville Fathom, under his latest guise recounting tales of shared revelries and sage advice. His eyes sparkled with the enthusiasm of a heart yet unacquainted with treachery. "Indeed, sir?" A grave voice interrupted, drawing Mr. Biddulph's attention to a gentleman of mature years and unblemished reputation, Mr. Sterling, who now stood nearby. "Count de Melville, you say? A man of prodigious charm, no doubt, and a most persuasive tongue." He paused, his gaze softening with a hint of melancholy. "Forgive my intrusion, young sir, but a name so illustrious often cloaks a history less so." Mr. Biddulph, somewhat taken aback, yet respecting the elder's dignified mien, bid him continue. "My good young man," Sterling began, leaning closer, "I have, in my travels, encountered many a Count de Melville, under various monikers. Their legacy, though often gilded with superficial splendor, is invariably etched in the tears of the credulous and the despair of the undone. Such men possess a singular talent for discovering the vulnerabilities of the innocent, for weaving webs of obligation and promises, only to leave their benefactors enmeshed in ruin. I speak not of mere misfortune, but of calculated, cold-hearted predation." Biddulph's cheerful countenance now clouded. "Sir, are you then suggesting this gentleman is not what he seems?" Sterling nodded slowly. "His seeming is his greatest weapon. He is a predator, Mr. Biddulph. Beware his counsel, shun his schemes, for his friendship is a more dangerous poison than an open enmity. Take heed, young sir, for Fathom's legacy, though often concealed, is always one of sorrow and regret for those he has touched." The elder departed as quietly as he had arrived, leaving the young man plunged into a profound disquiet. Whether this timely warning would pierce the veil of Fathom's charm, or if Biddulph, like so many before him, would still stumble into the snare, remained for fate to unfold. Yet, the seed of doubt, once sown, had begun its work, a faint but crucial echo of the countless miseries that constituted Ferdinand Fathom's true, hidden legacy. Ah, my dear reader, cast your mind back to the bustling salons and shadowed alleys, the glittering courts and cunning gambits that so richly defined the world of Ferdinand Count Fathom. A world, you'll recall, where masks were not merely for masquerades, but for daily existence, where reputation was meticulously crafted, and sincerity often a liability. In such a tableau, one might despair of ever finding genuine self, let alone building a life truly authentic. But it is precisely in the crucible of artifice that the diamond of truth reveals its brilliance. This chapter, a gentle counterpoint to the Fathom narrative, offers not a grand conquest, but a quiet revolution, a 7-day action plan for cultivating an authentic life, step by deliberate step. Forget the elaborate deceptions and the pursuit of fleeting external validation that ensnared many. Our journey is inward. Strix Day 1. The unveiling docs begin by identifying one small area where you wear a mask, however subtle. Perhaps a social nicety that feels untrue, or an opinion you voice merely to fit in. Observe it, acknowledge it, without judgment. This awareness is the first whisper of truth. Day 2. The inner cadence withdraw from the clamor. Spend a mere 20 minutes in silence, listening not to the world's demands, but to the gentle rhythm of your own thoughts and feelings. What arises unbidden? These are the roots of your authentic self. Day 3. Action aligned. Choose one small, seemingly insignificant action that aligns with a core value you identified yesterday. It could be a kind word offered without expectation, a moment of focused work, or a simple act of self-care. Let the integrity of the act be its sole reward. Day 4. Honest exchange. Seek out one genuine interaction. Instead of a superficial pleasantry, offer a sincere compliment, ask a truly curious question, or share a small, honest feeling. Watch how the world softens when you dare to be real. Day 5. Embrace the cracks to the perfect facade, so beloved by Fathom, is a prison. Today, acknowledge an imperfection, a mistake, a vulnerability. Allow yourself to be seen, even by yourself, as gloriously human, flawed yet whole. This is strength, not weakness. Day 6. Gratitude's anchor. Turn your gaze to what is truly good and unvarnished in your life. Not the grand achievements, but the simple blessings: a warm cup, a clear sky, a quiet moment. Cultivate a profound sense of gratitude for these authentic realities. Day 7. Intentional bearing test. With the insights of the past 6 days, set a small intention for how you will carry your authentic self into the world today and beyond. Not a drastic overhaul, but a conscious commitment to living with greater integrity in your words, actions, and presence. This plan, my friend, is not about becoming a saint in 7 days, but about initiating a lifelong adventure of truth-seeking. It is a rebellion against the artifice, a testament to the profound power of simply being you, authentically, wonderfully you, amidst any world, even one peopled by cunning fathoms. My dear friends, pull closer, for though the grand tapestry of Count Fathom's adventures is now rolled up and stored, its threads, dyed in cunning and consequence, still hold lessons profound, if sometimes unsettling. We've journeyed through masquerades and betrayals, witnessed fortunes won and lost, and now, as his name fades, let us distill from that intoxicating brew 3 unvarnished truths, as sharp and clear as a winter morning. First, and perhaps most chillingly, asked that the world is often more willing to be fooled than to face an unpleasant truth. Did we not see Fathom, a man of base origin and baser intent, ascend Europe's social ladders merely by donning refinement's garb, a silver tongue, and unwavering audacity? His victims, dazzled by his outward show of wealth or piety, yearned for the illusion he offered, be it a quick profit, a noble suitor, or a virtuous friend. They chose to believe the polished lie over the grubby reality, a testament not just to Fathom's skill, but to the perilous gullibility woven deep into the human heart. Appearances, my dears, are often the most effective cloaks for the most heinous designs. Secondly, a life built on deceit, no matter how grand its temporary palaces, is a fortress without foundations. Fathom accumulated riches, titles, and fleeting power. Yet, his true currency, paranoia. Each conquest brought not peace, but fresh anxieties, the gnawing fear of exposure, the relentless need for ever more elaborate lies, the haunting shadows of past misdeeds. He lived in a gilded cage of his own making, pursued by a dormant conscience and the specters of his victims. His laughter, I dare say, was always tinged with a nervous tremor, his triumphs hollow. True contentment can never be purchased with stolen gold or built upon others' ruined trust. And finally, a truth often slow but inexorable, asterisk, even the most audacious villainy eventually falters, often consuming itself from within. Fathom's brilliance was undeniable, his schemes intricate. But his relentless self-interest isolated him. He trusted no one, and no one truly trusted him. His cleverness, untempered by empathy, eventually turned against him. His elaborate deceptions demanded an unsustainable mental toll, leading to errors, to moments of vulnerability his earlier successes had merely papered over. His very being, dedicated to artifice, frayed under the strain. The world, in its own slow, grinding way, tends to right itself, casting out those who warp its natural order. Though justice may wear a languid pace, it seldom forgets its quarry. So, as we close this chapter on Ferdinand Fathom, let these three truths linger: beware the captivating mask, value honesty's solid ground, and remember that even the darkest shadows must eventually retreat from the encroaching light, however faint. The stage of life, my friends, demands more than just a brilliant performance. It demands a genuine heart. So, we've journeyed through the labyrinthine passages of Ferdinand's existence, have we not, my attentive companion? We've witnessed the dazzling allure of his schemes, the meticulous craft of his deceptions, and the eventual, inevitable unraveling of a life built on quicksand and chicanery. Now, as the final chapter of his cautionary tale beckons, it is not merely Ferdinand's fate that hangs in the balance, but, perhaps more subtly, our own. For while few of us are destined to don his flamboyant disguises or navigate the treacherous currents of high society swindles, the fundamental human proclivities that drove him, ambition, vanity, the craving for consequence, these are the very engines that hum within us all. This, then, is our moment of introspection, our call to action. You, who have observed the meticulous construction of Fathom's elaborate facades, must now turn that discerning gaze inward. Are we not, each in our own measure, tempted by the expedient path, by the glittering promise of immediate gratification, even if it demands a slight bending of the truth, a convenient oversight, a gentle manipulation of perception? Fathom pursued power and renown with relentless vigor, yet found himself ultimately bereft of genuine esteem, isolated in a prison of his own making, haunted by the specters of his past. His was a life adorned with external splendors, yet hollowed out at its very core. Therefore, I implore you, let Fathom's misfortunes be your illumination. Choose not the shadowed byways of deceit, however promising they may appear in the transient glow of opportunity. Cultivate, instead, the sturdy oak of integrity. Seek wealth not only in coin, but in character, distinction not in pretense, but in true merit, contentment not in the fleeting applause of the multitude, but in the quiet affirmation of a clear conscience. For it is in these bedrock principles that genuine happiness resides, an enduring edifice far more magnificent than any castle of cards Ferdinand ever constructed. Embrace the demanding, yet infinitely rewarding, path of virtue. Let your legacy be one of honor, your relationships built on trust, and your spirit unburdened by the weight of artifice. The choice, dear reader, as always, is profoundly, unmistakably yours.